In 1992, RAF firefighter Carl Austin-Behan was honoured for his bravery when he pulled a man from a burning aircraft.
And I managed to get my hands underneath the pilot, undo his buckle a little bit, but then as I lifted him off, his head sort of fell back, and I remember the mask had melted onto his face.
Celebrated as a hero, he received honours from the Queen. But 5 years later, Carl was kicked out of the Air Force. Why? Because he was gay.
From an early age, I knew that I was different. Obviously, we didn't use the word gay back then. From probably being about the age of sort of 6 or 7. And I remember going over to see my brother Paul over at Aquatiri when I was 17 and a half. And I noticed he had a fire service in the RAF. I'd never thought that, why would you have a fire service in the Air Force, you know what I mean? But I do remember when I went to the Careers Information Office on Fountain Street in Manchester, them giving me a little chitty to sort of say, and all they said to me, oh, can you sign that? Oh, you're not gay, are you? And then they laughed, and then that was it. And I've still got that piece of paper. It does state on there that if you're caught doing homosexual acts, then you will be court-martialed. And I think even from sort of day one of going into the Air Force, I was living a double, sometimes a treble life because of my sexuality.
This double life, weekdays on the base and weekends on Manchester's gay scene, caught up with him in 1997 when he was summoned to his squadron headquarters.
So I went there and I had to go in uniform, and there was the Padre there, 2 RAF police there, and OCPSF, and literally just sort of asked me, SEC Austin, do you have homosexual tendencies? So I sat there and froze for a minute, well, that's probably a second. They asked me again, and then I burst into tears, so I think I'd answered the question for them. They then told me that, unfortunately, due to what I'd now disclosed to them, my service was no longer required. I was incompatible to service life, and that I could go to military prison for 6 months. Am I aware of the consequences now I've admitted to my sexuality? I was literally given probably about 10-15 minutes to get off camp. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to anybody. I was given a police escort to pack 3 big boxes, told they'd be delivered to a place of my choice in the UK. And that was it. And I was marched out the camp gates effectively. And I just remember being in my car and pulling up in a little lay-by outside Honington's gates and sitting there for 3 hours just crying. Because I'd now just lost my career, I'd lost my job, I'd lost my home, lost all my friends, lost everything within 10 minutes for my sexuality that had no impact on any of the work that I did.
Distraught at the loss of his career, Carl became a gay rights activist, and in 2001, he was crowned Mr. Gay UK.
So yeah, it was like a beauty pageant within the gay world, you know. And some of the winners, you know, it was, you know, very muscly, you know, good-looking guys. I wanted to normalise being gay. It was about that fact of like trying to turn the negative into a positive. And at first, I entered it as, you know, on a few drinks, like, yeah, I could do this, and this will show the Air Force what for.
Since then, Carl has continued to be recognised for his campaigning in the LGBT community. He received an honorary doctorate from his local university, and in 2019 was given an OBE for his efforts. He even became the first openly gay Lord Mayor in the country when he was selected to be the Lord Mayor of Greater Manchester. But through it all, he never forgot the hurt of being told his sexuality was incompatible with service life.
I was one of the founder members of Fighting with Pride, and I was one of the trustees in the initial stages, and it was very much about the fact of, you know, a very new charity to look at supporting LGBT veterans that had effectively been affected by the ban between 1967 and 2000, and that was the initial sort of stages of it.
Fighting with Pride secured an independent, judge-led inquiry into the historical treatment of LGBT people in Britain's armed forces.
The review came out last year, 49 recommendations. First recommendation was to have an apology from the Prime Minister. That took place July last year. I mean, it was an amazing day. I was there on the day I went down to London, and I was in the hall when we got it. I was sat above and watching what was going on. But I do believe they need to sort of follow that through now. They seem to be stalling on an agreement that they made, and the fact that, you know, those 49 recommendations, yes, some of those things are in place, some of those things are taking part now.
And we're talking about compensation here, aren't we?
We are talking about compensation, and I sometimes forget the way that how I was treated so badly back then. I seem to have sort of parked it somewhere in the back of there and just sort of ignoring it, but actually it was horrific. Yeah. And I think that that's where the compensation comes in, and the fact that, you know, sitting on some of the town halls with some of the people I'm having conversations with, the way that they were treated, the fact that, you know, some people, their families were ripped apart. You know, they did go to prison.
Carl and Fighting with Pride continue to fight for compensation for those who were dismissed from the forces for being gay. But he still remembers his service with pride.
I was absolutely devastated of losing my career, losing the job. But actually I didn't want being gay to define me. It actually turns out now that being kicked out of the Air Force for being gay has actually defined me. But if the armed forces had come back to me to say, look, the law has now changed.
Do you want to come back?
Do you want to come back? I'd have probably gone back.
After decades of campaigning and a military career that ought to have been characterised by a heroic action, today Carl reminds current serving personnel of the gay history that exists in the armed forces. He does so with the support of his husband Simon and the love of his 5-year-old daughter Willow. James Wharton, Forces News. Thanks for watching. For more from Forces News, like and subscribe to our channel.